Here we go.
Testing.
Yeah, it worked fine. Okay, so we're live. Okay. How do you like that? Does that look okay?
Oh, that's perfect.
Very sexy. Looks great. I like the background.
Do you want me to do it?
Yes, we do need a microphone actually. We'll move it here.
Bam.
And actually, my voice kind of carries, so this is okay. All right.
There's Claire representing. Claire. There she is.
Welcome, welcome.
Hello,
Come on in.
Claire. Where would you like to sit? There's Tanya. How are you guys?
Great.
Good. How are you?
Great.
How are you? I'm glad
Awesome.
you're here.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, we're gonna poll the audience, and you're gonna have to speak to the rest of the island people.
We have the clap. Fine. Great.
Okay.
Lisa's out of town, but Tricia and Jane are where? Studying, writing papers?
I don't know. Maybe if they're in the Dr. Neal class.
We turned in our assignment though.
You did?
Yesterday, so
The
we don't really
10-page
have
paper?
anything pending. No, just the proposal. The 10-page paper is coming.
That's a different story. Okay.
All right. Well, let's begin. Hello, and welcome to the first ever live streaming session for ILEM Alumni on ongoing formation. I'm your host, Tanya Sinak, ILEM alumni from 2018, and currently the coordinator for the lay programs at Notre Dame Seminary. So thank you to the panelists for being here. Thank you to our audience, audience of one, for being here, and thank you to you, whoever's viewing. Thank you for joining us. So, since the inception of the Institute for Lay Ecclesial Ministry in 2013, ILEM has had 3 different cohorts of lay students who were called, formed, commissioned, and sent out by Archbishop Amen in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. There's been ILEM 2015 was the first group, ILEM 2018 is the second group, and ILEM 2019, just recently, was the third group that was commissioned. So as more groups of lay women and men are being called, formed, commissioned, and sent out by the Archbishop Amen, the question that is being asked is, what is a lay ecclesial minister? Who are they? What's their identity? What is their nature? Are they a group of super Catholics, like the Special Avenger team, for the Catholic Church? Is it a specific title or a specific role, lay ecclesial ministry, or even is it a specific vocation? Well, one thing we know for sure is that our treasure is not monetary, but awaits us in heaven. So what I have done today to kind of help us reflect on this question is I've invited 3 different ILEM alumni from different groups, Naomi Kim, Rafi Flores, and Karen Baker, who will just share a little bit about themselves, what year they were commissioned, and what is their ministry, and if they have a different professional work within their ministry, then to share that with us as well as we go. So I'm just going to turn it over to you all.
Thank you, Tanya. My name is Naomi Kim, and I was newly commissioned this year in 2019. I work in my professional life as an attorney, and I am a volunteer at Center Jesus the Lord, serving in different capacities over the years. I pass it on.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya. Again, I'm Rafi Flores. I was commissioned in 2018 and earned my MAPL this past May. I'm currently fully employed at St. Scholastica Academy as a theology teacher and part of the campus ministry team, but I also volunteer as a coordinator for confirmation at St. Peter Parish in Covington.
My name is Karen Baker. I was commissioned in 2015 in the first group that was then known as the Co-workers Leadership Institute, and it changed names, so I have to remember that.
Yes.
But we were the guinea pigs, so it was a wonderful experience. I work here at Mary Queen of Peace in Mandeville as the office manager, which encompasses a lot of things. I'll talk more about that later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Great. So let's just begin by breaking open the question, what and who are lay ecclesial ministers? And I actually had Dr. Tom Neal kind of help me think of a reflection question. Because I mean, as we know, it is a fairly new term. It's a fairly new living out of what Vatican II taught about the laity to get really involved in the church in many different ways. So the reflection question that I like to ask you all just to reflect on is thinking about yourself now as a lay ecclesial minister in your own particular work, your service or ministry in the church, and thinking about your identity as a lay ecclesial ministry, one who's been commissioned by the Archbishop, given an official status in the church. How would you describe how would you describe your understanding of what a lay ecclesial minister is now as compared to when you first began the ILEM program? And how has that grown, or how has that developed? So would anybody like to begin? You can think about it. It's kind of a tough question there. It is a long question. It is a long question. Thank you, Dr. Neal. But basically, to summarize that, how would you describe, no, let's start over. How do you understand and how would you describe what a lay ecclesial minister is now? And how has that understanding and description developed since when you first began the ILEM program? And because I know for me, it's definitely developed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, I think thinking on this, I think it's important for us to look at, how do we define the laity, both in our theology, but also in practice, right? So when you look at, if you were to ask any layperson in the pew on a Sunday, what is a layperson? I guarantee you most lay people would answer, well, a layperson, they're not a priest. They say, okay, like what else? No, they're just not a priest. And that's an interesting thing to note, that ladies tend to identify ourselves in a negative fashion. We say we're not priests. That's all we are, not priests. So I think that's something interesting to say. What is the laity? Well, the laity are those who are called to participate in the mission of the church ad extra, meaning really outside of the church, as being, in a sense, missionaries sanctifying the world from within. That's what the laity is. Laity. The ministry of the priesthood, right, the ministerial priesthood, they're ad intra, they're within the church, really living out the sacraments, really facilitating the sacramental life of the church, and having the authority to lead the church in her mission. And then you have us, the lay ecclesial ministers, which is it's a new phenomenon, right? You didn't really have us, 30, 40 years ago? It didn't exist.
Not long ago, but yes.
Exactly, so what are we? And I would answer that we're not, lay ecclesial ministers are just not priests, but also not just lay people. I would say that it is not a big vocation. Perhaps it can be understood as a little vocation, but it's ultimately a title given to us by the archbishops to proclaim a new reality of the ecclesial life of the church. You can't deny that right now we are in the reality of the church in which more and more lay people are taking positions of ministerial leadership ad intra, within the life of the church. That right there was clarified so much for me in my formation. In the beginning, I just said, oh yeah, you have youth ministers, you have this ministers, you have people who work in church. I don't really say like, oh, I just work in church. I really do believe that I participate in the ministry of the church uniquely as a layperson, bringing in the insights, the lived experience of not being a sacramental or a ministerial priest, and therefore the way I can really help the church's mission as a minister is by, if I can use this language, is by doing ministry that is sheep to sheep, so to speak, right? Or if you want another analogy, if we're going to speak of priests as the shepherds and the laity of the sheep, then perhaps the lay ministers are kind of like the sheepdogs, right? We kind of help corral the sheep in different ways to get them to the shepherds, to get them to the sacramental life of the church. That's really what I would say is a lay ecclesial minister now in my mentality, because it kind of clarifies what I'm doing every single day. I'm not administering the sacraments. I can't. I'm guiding people to the sacraments, by accompanying them as a layperson, right? Corralling them, so to speak.
Thanks. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Rafi. Anybody else? Karen?
Karen,
I'll give it a try.
I'm gonna give you the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Well, when I think about comparing it to what I do now and what I may have thought before I started formation, like even now in my role here as office manager, which as I said, encompasses a lot of things. I just never know what will happen from day to day in a parish office. You go sit down and you don't know who's going to walk in, you don't know who's going to call, you don't know what's going to happen. There's so many things. So I think I look at my formation as a lay ecclesial minister as being able to have the background to cope with all of that, to understand how to, like you were saying, to almost walk with people, accompany them. And I don't think about it all the time like, oh, I'm a lay ecclesial minister, so this is how I'm going to do this. But I think I try to be a witness to that formation, and without it, I don't think I would be able to perform my role as effectively or be in this ministry. And it's interesting because I had someone, when I first started, I've been here 4 years full time. So I was commissioned in 2015. So it was right after that I started full time here. But someone walked into my office who's known me for a long time now, and I had gone through this formation, and she said, do you feel like you've wasted your formation? And I thought that was an interesting question. And I know what she meant. Like, well, you're a lay ecclesial minister. Shouldn't you be teaching theology or doing spiritual direction or something much more visible as building up the kingdom of God in some way or serving the church? But it's no, because the Archbishop has said, I know when he first came up with this thought that he wanted to do this, that he wants people on the front lines of a parish such as this to have that formation, to serve, because as a lay ecclesial ministry, which, as you unpack it and as the document the co-workers in the vineyard says, that we are collaborating with the clergy, we're collaborating with also the laity, like you said, a bridge between them, and to work as that. And that's what I do every day, really. I call myself a funnel, but really it's it's making those connections, and that to have that formation helps so much, because before that, and I can say when I started the program, I had an idea of what lay ecclesial ministry might be, or a lay ecclesial minister, but to see it in action, I see that now reflecting on it and what that means and how much it has helped, because without that background, it would be a lot more difficult, to be able to handle all the things that come your way. So I see that it's really that journey that gives you and that background to serve. And you see that service, the ministry as service into the mission of Christ, and that's why we're here. So it's been a big help, and I'm glad we did this, because I don't sit and, like I said, reflect on it a lot, but now you see it, and you look back, I do see that, and what a blessing it's been.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Naomi?
Thank you. I think the long of the short of understanding lay ecclesial ministry, or what is a lay ecclesial minister, the thing that I'm left with is basically, before I was in ILEM, I remember the first ministry I was coaxed into, and it was in the Respect Life ministry. And I was like deer in the headlights, because I had never had any type of leadership role or had taken upon a ministry. I might be a helper or a volunteer. I was like that person. And so to inherit a ministry that was, I don't even know how many years ago, it was a lot. And I just remember, I probably looked like I was a deer in the headlights, and I had no idea where to start. And I just remember they were just like, oh yeah, just like, make sure respect, the march, we have 40 days for life. They kind of gave me some basic instructions of what I needed to do. And I just took that and I just implemented it. I didn't make it into something more. I just did the bare minimum, like what I was expected to do, because I lacked, and I felt, maybe I couldn't articulate it at that time, lacked leadership in how to carry out ministry. I didn't reach out to others for resources or to just pick their brain. I just did my work, stayed in my lane. And that's what I thought ministry was conducted. Now, moving on to fast forward with ILEM, and the first sessions, I remember Archbishop Amond, when he was defining what is ministry, and especially this program, he used the word leadership. And I was not expecting that word. I was like, what did I get myself into? I wasn't trying to become a leader. I just want to serve the Lord in the church. And I realized that through the formation that ILEM provides, that's definitely one quality that is a product, an outcome, is you do acquire, you do learn how to be a leader, serving however you're being served. So now if our priest or someone else invited me to consider a different type of ministry, I feel like I have a foundational base that I lacked before. And even though it may be something I've never done before and it's outside of my comfort zone, I'm not necessarily that deer in the headlights again. I feel because I'm standing on something, I have this confidence of, I know I can navigate this with the Lord, and I would totally tackle it completely 360 degrees, or I'm sorry, 180 degrees different from prior. So it's this really, really can happen. I mean, it happens in real life. So for me, that was kind of one of the, I guess, obvious changes in what ILEM has done to teach me what lay ecclesial ministers can be.
Thank you. Okay. Awesome. I think what I hear y'all saying is, being in ILEM, and being formed and trained gave you kind of the foundation you needed to be a leader, but to be in ministry with the ordained, with the archbishop, with the priest, but also to be a leader with the laity. So, if I could answer just briefly the question when I first began, I thought kind of like what you had said, we're kind of like a bridge. We're a bridge if you think of like we're on a battlefield, because, well, I kind of think we are on a battlefield in the spiritual life in many ways, is that the ordained, the archbishop, the priest, the deacons, they're the chaplains, right? They're the ones who give us the support, right? They could be the medics. They're the ones who give us what we need. The laity, we're in the trenches, right? And then between the trenches and between the chaplain and those who are off giving support to those who need it are the lay ecclesial ministers, and today is a perfect feast day to have this, because today is the feast of Saint Mary Magdalene, right? The apostle to the apostles. She could be the first lay ecclesial ministry. This is not official church teaching, by the way, but the fact that, she was called, she was formed and trained by Christ, then she was commissioned and sent out in a way. She was commissioned when she had that live experience of Jesus risen from the dead. And she was sent out in today's gospel, go tell my brothers and your brothers, that I'm going to my God and your God. So my question would be to you then, just to kind of follow up on what you've shared, which I think has been fabulous, by the way. Thank you very much. Is lay ecclesial ministry, is it a calling? Is it something that God puts on your heart, a desire, a call? Or is it something that maybe the person, the laity, wants to get trained better and wants to kind of just become a better leader in what they're doing? You know, because I think if it's a call, I think our response is going to be different than if it was just like, well, I just want to get trained and I just want to become a leader, or maybe they're the same thing. So just kind of share with me a little bit about, do you think lay ecclesial ministry is a call? And if it is a call, how did you sense that? And how are you living out? The last shall be first. So Naomi will go now.
I just have a very short, quick answer to that question. Going through ILEM, my answer is it is a call, and it is a call from the Lord, a vocation. Because if you give yourself like 100%, if you're just going because this can improve my skill set, I'm just going for the education, I don't know if you have longevity, because you need commitment to get through those years. Especially being from the laity, this means we have full-time jobs, we have families to care for, we have other responsibilities and obligations and other relationships that we have to weigh and balance. I mean, we're not going to school and we have no bills to pay, et cetera, et cetera. So to give of your precious time, which in this busyness of life, and we're pulled in so many different ways, it's a sacrifice. I had to give up some social life, et cetera, like work life, in order to make room for ILEM. If it was not a call, I would have left. Because, like I said, it's a commitment. And I honestly feel like if there is someone who joins just strictly for other purposes, I think they would leave.
Thank you, Naomi. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, just reflecting on this quickly, I would say it's a calling, but I would caution to say, and really use the language of vocation, if we're really going to put it in the language of a big V vocation, because we can't call this state of life as a big V vocation, because we're not priests. And my vocation is a married man, or rather, I would say, if this is a vocation, I would say that lay ecclesial ministers live into the universal vocation of the universal priesthood. And we do so in a way that's unique among the laity, because all laity should be priest, prophet, king. That's not really an option for us, right? So what does the lay ecclesial minister do? Well, then we, again, within the life of the church, at intro, we facilitate spaces, opportunities, and encounters by which the laity can then live into that triple identity of priest, prophet, king, the moon, right? So I would say the lay ecclesial minister is called to ministry in a unique way, but not unique in the way of the ministerial priesthood, right? Because it's not tied explicitly to the sacraments. And that's a really challenging question. It really, really is. I'm going to be thinking about it for a while, because yeah, I'm called, but my calling is not just to be a minister. Like, that's not my explicit calling. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and those are the things that led me to do ministry and live ministry well. But then you have subsections within that, right? Because like Naomi, you're a lawyer, right? That's your main job, and then you have your lay ecclesial ministry, which is more volunteer work. Whereas for me, I am both a lay ecclesial minister and a theologian. So that leaves me in a different place. The theologian is seen differently in the life of the church than the lay minister is. And I think a lot of lay ministers are theologians, but not all lay ministers are theologians. So I think as we really dive into our lives as lay ministers, I think that needs to take, people need to take some serious reflection. Yes, you're a lay ecclesial minister because you're volunteering or you're working within the life of the church. Yes, you may be a theologian, But if you're saying, like you're saying, if you're just a theologian, should you just be a lay theologian? Or rather, should your theological work always be paired with a form of ministry? And if you're just, quote unquote, just a lay person sitting in the pew, but you're not doing anything, in a sense, to live into the ministerial mission of the church, should you just be sitting in the pew and receiving the sacraments, or should you actually be doing the life? So I think perhaps, and this is just 100% me, this idea of lay ecclesial ministry needs to be expanded, right? If you're doing,
Absolutely.
if you're doing
Yes.
anything in the life of the church, there should be formation there, right? If you're a couple, right, and you're leading retreats for engaged people, but you have no theological formation besides what's in front of you in the packet, you run the risk of really, really, really messing up in the articulation of what the church believes and what we know is true. So I think all lay people should experience a degree of training of what it means to be a lay who does ministry. Because I think all lay people should participate in the ministerial life of the church. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And then I would just add one thing, thanks to Professor Haddad, if he's watching, hi. I would add, along with the ministry, I think also we need to understand the difference between ministry and the apostolate. I think all laity are called to the apostolate, right, which is sanctifying the world, right, bringing about the kingdom of God on this earth. Now, all laity may not be called to ministry, which is the ad intra aspect of serving within the church. So, Karen, I'll let you reflect on that question. Thank you, Rafi.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, thank you, Tanya. That's a very good distinction, because I think when we talk about, or you've called, to be a lay ecclesial minister, I think is a calling in a sense, because there are a lot of people who volunteer in the church. There's lots of people who, serve in many different capacities as lectors and communion ministers and in the choir, and they're serving in the apostolate, like you say. But this lay ecclesial ministry, which is or lay ecclesial minister, which is fairly new, like we said, it's not a title, but it is what they call it, an adjective, I think, in the co-workers document. It describes what we do, because we are working in the church, actually, where we're serving in the ministry of Christ officially. And I think that that really seals it. The commissioning is that we're formed, and we're called, and we're formed, and then we're sent. And I think that part of it, to me, was the real important key, because, like I said, I had I've read a lot about ministry, I volunteered a lot, and I've studied it. But the commissioning is really important, to know that we are actually sent to serve officially for the archbishop and for the priests, and like in my local parish, for the local church. So the idea of calling, I think, in a sense, I felt called, and not that I personally thought this is what I need to do, but that from others, because I think whenever you're discerning what you're doing, you listen to what others are saying. So in my work in the parish, as I volunteered, and I got very interested in it. And then I worked at the newspaper at the Times-Picayune for many years. So my favorite story is that I got laid off while I was on the Sea of Galilee. And this was in 2012, right before I entered the ILEM program. I actually filled out my application while I was in the Tel Aviv airport after I lost my job. So I thought, well, God's calling me somewhere. And so if I had any question about whether I should, think about working for the church, I felt very strongly that maybe this is what I should do. So as I moved along on that journey, I ended up here. So I think definitely, not that I thought it was the right thing or that I felt called, but it was sort of discerned with others that this is where I should be. And so I think also, as a lay ecclesial minister, as opposed to, like you were saying, the ordained priesthood, it's not permanent. It's not that I'll always do this, because at some point, I won't. And then I will still be in the apostolate at the church. I'll still be trying to sanctify the world, but I might not be serving officially in this capacity. So I think that all was in my mind as ways we could look at that calling.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, I'd like to kind of talk to our audience, or poll our audience. Do you have any questions or or comments or anything you would like to ask or share? Actually, yes, you can use that one.
Is this one?
But hold on a second. We turned it off. Let's just use this one.
I must say that I agree with the entire panel. And your original question, I thought when Karen answered the phones, let's say, now that she's a lay ecclesial minister, her understanding of the person on the other end is a whole different picture than she may have had before. When Rafi is still teaching theology, he's got a different flavor to it, a different color to it now, because he is a minister. And same thing with Naomi. I think that your understanding of even volunteering, it has color, it has meaning. I think that we are helping build the foundation of the church. What I learned in ILEM is how little I know, but how much more I know or appreciate than I did before when I started. I knew that this was where I needed to be. I felt it was a calling, but I feel stronger. There's more color. Things make sense. The Old Testament is lived out in the New Testament. Who would have thought that? I mean, I agree. I think that it's a calling that we choose to accept in different levels. And yes, I do think that just by our baptism, we have to go out and help sanctify everyone around us. But we are honored and gifted with formation that we did not have prior to coming. We are gifted with this that we can live out. I might not be able to give you the full theology behind it, but I hope that my actions can live it out for you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you, Claire. All right. Yeah. So, should we something else to say? Okay. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I think some of the main key and points is that it is connected to the ordained, right? The archbishop, right? We are not trying to set up our own little kingdoms, so to speak, but we're working through the priesthood of Christ, right? Which begins in the fullness, with the bishop and with the priest, so we are collaborating in that, and also that we are a bridge, right? We are sent out to serve and to be kind of an example and a witness to what we've been given, and to call others and to help them. So let's kind of jump into this. Question. If viewers, you are more than welcome to kind of comment. If you'd like to comment, you can comment there, like chat. If you have a question for any of our panelists. But let's kind of open a question of just sharing a little bit about what do you find is the joys and the challenges of being a lay ecclesial minister? So,
joys, hopes, griefs, sorrows.
Joys, hopes, griefs, and sorrows. So, yeah.
I believe some of the joys for me has been in educated and formed more, even in understanding how I serve in the apostolate, even though I do serve in the church as a volunteer. And another thing that's just coming to mind is the fact that because I've gone through the ILEM formation, and I'm still soaking it in that I'm a lay ecclesial minister. In the 2019 class, it's been roughly 6 months. So it hasn't quite soaked in that reality. And asked me a few years later, probably have a different answer to that. So even though I haven't quite seen myself like in that reality, our priest has. And so it took me aback. So he was like, Naomi, you finished ILEM, and we gotta use that. That's good stuff. So would you consider being part of the RCIA program? And I'm like, I'm just taken aback. I mean, this is awesome stuff. And of course, in my heart of hearts, I'm like, yes, like this is great. But to even be considered or asked, or that crossed his mind, I definitely attribute that as because of ILEM. So that is definitely a joy for someone to recognize that and seeing that this program is truly forming the laity to stand up and lead in ministry. But still, I mean, that's a newer thing happening. My reality, of course, is working in the secular world, in the profession that I feel I was called to. ILEM also really opened my eyes to what is the lay apostolate, not only what is it, but as a lay person of the church, even just from that capacity, as priest, prophet, and king, as we inherited that role through baptism, how do I live that out? And I feel like ILEM in that formation, even though maybe that wasn't like necessarily the goal of it, a lot of that has been formed in me, which has helped me a lot in working and in communion with other fellow lawyers in my building who are either professed atheists or agnostics or unknown at this point. And somehow I'm like the token Catholic/Christian in this group. And ILEM has created these things that I would never have done certain things, but it was because of ILEM I have. So for instance, just to give an example, I would not talk about hot button issues like abortion or gay marriage with any of these people. Like that just, if I want to be annihilated, like that's what I should do. I mean, like you don't argue with other lawyers who do not agree with you clearly on these issues. But I learned that being leaven in the world, you have to engage in dialogue. You can't be afraid to be questioned of your faith or just receive questions, nor should you be afraid to question. All of this has helped me to engage and have conversations with people about issues that normally I would get riled up, passionate. For instance, like if it was abortion, and you just get so fired up that you're really arguing with each other, and it gets ugly. But through ILEM, I was taught there's another way. You truly can dialogue about something with the other person who has a contrary position, and you don't leave cussing at each other or calling each other names and just being unchristian. You actually can leave the table with, maybe we didn't convince or persuade the other person, but we talked about it, man to man. So that's just kind of one example that comes to mind, that normally I would shy away from it, I would avoid it completely, because I don't want to be ostracized, I don't want to be put on the spot, and it's still a work in progress. I mean, sometimes like when we have our lunchroom, and I just never know, especially with the news, I never know what's coming my way. If it's an immigration issue, is it abortion, is it marriage, is it gender identity, et cetera, and I feel like they kind of look at me as like the representative of the Christian world, and I'm like, oh, but ILEM has still, with the different dimensions that we have groomed over the years, one of them being the intellectual. So we have had theology courses. that has, I mean, tremendously given me a newer confidence. I do not know everything when it comes to like the depth of theology that's out there. But just to get a taste of it has given me this confidence that I didn't have before. So I can engage with my fellow colleagues in a way that was impossible prior.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
In terms of joys, I think the joy of being a lay ecclesial minister is accompaniment. I think that beautiful joy of being seen as someone who's not a priest, but who's not just a lay person, and therefore approach with struggles with different things. Or really, I'll give an example with the struggle of not receiving the grace of reconciliation in X amount of years. That's an uncomfortable thing for someone to go up to a priest about. But when you're a lay ecclesial minister, as with any laity, there's a degree of comfortability of like, I'm struggling with this, I don't know what to do, and therefore you can kind of point the person towards that sacramental grace, or rather even accompany them. Or I've had so many experiences with students or other adults or just parents of students or other people who, in different ways, I've been able to accompany them towards them reaching out to the Lord for grace. And I think that really is the joy of it. That's the whole reason I'm in lay ecclesial ministry, right? It's to help people. I think it was Martin Luther who said, no, we're just beggars showing other beggars where to eat bread. And Martin Luther was wrong about a lot of things, but I think that's one thing he was right about. Like, particularly as a lay ecclesial minister, I know what it's like to experience the bread of life. I know it in an intellectual way. I know it now in an experiential way. And the experience that I know is real and true and beautiful, right? Now I can bring others to it. And not even bring them, I can just walk with others towards that same experience in their own particular way. That's the joy. You see and know the beauty of theology, and you're called to live it, I think, more clearly since you know it now. I think the difficulty, the real challenge, I think is the challenge that it should cut every lay minister to their core. I think we all know is that we all get to experience the humanity of the church much more than other laity, right? Why? Because if Father so-and-so has a bad day and he lets you have it in your parish office, and if you go and tell other people in the parish that they did that, that's not going to be good for the life of the church. So you have to, in a fraternal way, perhaps speak with Father and not deal with it. But that shows you, in a sense, the humanity, the imperfect side of our church, which is holy and not like a holy church of sinners, right? I believe, right? As Foresti said, that's the biggest challenge for me. That you see it and you experience it and you know it more clearly, more than others, because you're living it, right? Ad intra, you're really living within the life of the church. So whenever a wound comes out, you see it and it hurts you. I think a little bit deeper, I would argue. And so yeah, that's the biggest challenge.
Thanks. Karen? Joys and challenges.
Joys and challenges. Well, the first joy that came to my mind really was the community that created the ILEM program, the people I journeyed with, and then the people I've met here along the way, because that has been such a gift. I just got a text from there were 8 of us, 8 women who were commissioned in 2015, and we'll get together Saturday. We try to get these things together even if it's a couple of times a year. But I would have never met these people. I would have never known them except for this, and that we're able to share our joys and challenges together and in doing things like this. I mean, it's really been such a blessing, and it keeps you going, and when you're especially faced with the challenges. And I agree with Rafi, and I hadn't thought of that, but you're absolutely right. One of the challenges is working in the church. You see how the sausage is made, they say.
Oh, yes. That's a great line.
There's a lot of things, but we're still here to serve and to do our best. And I struggle with sometimes the challenges to maintain our focus on why we're here, because I need to mail merge letters and do the parish calendar and answer the phones. but all remembering that I'm still serving the kingdom of God, and how I do that is very important. And so, like I was telling somebody, I came to Mass one day, and I'm just going to sit here after Mass and pray for a minute. Somebody scoots down the pew and says, Karen, the toilets aren't working, or the air conditioner's working, or the whatever, and that's okay. That's all part of it. So I think, like I was saying before, without that formation, I don't think I could face those challenges as pastorally as well, because you just have to do what you have to do, and so that is a challenge, though, but one that, at least with this formation, you understand that challenge and how to respond to it. I think.
Very good. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, Rafi, you actually took the quote out of my mouth, but I actually got it from you, so I'm glad you said it. About the quote of, we're just one beggar learning how to show other beggars where to go. And yeah, and I really like the whole concept. I mean, I think that's a definite, a great description of a lay ecclesial minister, is like a guide, right? A mentor, right? Someone who has been trained, has been formed, who has the confidence to walk with and to accompany and to serve, and to lead them to Christ, to the sacraments. So, okay, no comment from the audience, but all right, great. So we will move on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just ask you a series of questions that were developed by, once again, Dr. Neal, so thank you very much. Okay, so we'll do this as like you can choose, okay? So there's 4 questions. Each of them is on a different dimension of formation. So there is the pastoral dimension, the spiritual dimension, the intellectual dimension, and the human dimension. Okay, so I'll basically just go to you first and say, which dimension would you like a question from? And I'll give you that question, and you can go ahead and just respond. So we'll start with Karen. Karen, which dimension do you choose?
Yes, give me pastoral.
Pastoral dimension for 100. Okay. So here's the question. Describe for us how, as you have grown in your own identity as a lay ecclesial minister in role, how do you think of yourself as a public person of the church, someone who has a public representative role, who is speaking and acting on behalf of the church in a particular way, although not the same as a priest, but in a public role? Because we were commissioned, right? And the Archbishop is giving us his confidence, right? To say, you can speak on behalf of me, on behalf of the Catholic Church and the Archdiocese of New Orleans. We are entrusting with you a ministry within the ministry of Christ, the priesthood of Christ. So how have you grown in that understanding, and how do you see yourself as a public person for the church? Does that make sense, that question?
I think so.
Okay.
There's a lot of parts to it.
I know. We'll have to simplify
Whatever
these.
part.
Yes, you just respond. You just respond whichever way. That public representative.
It's a public representative. And to sense, when I first thought, I don't really see myself as a public representative because I sit in my office pretty much all day, but I do talk to a lot of people. So really, in that sense, someone calls about a funeral and I talk to them, or what have you. And there's a lot of things. We have a lot of different groups here with ministry leaders, and I deal with them. I guess I don't think of myself as public as standing up and giving a talk. I don't do that, really. But I was also thinking, as you were speaking, as the Holy Spirit was talking to me, about the whole communication side. Like I run our Facebook page and our whatever pages and our things, social media and our emails and our website. And in those roles, even though people see me publicly, that is where I'm putting messages out as far as our faith. And I think because of my formation, I am able to do that with the confidence, knowing I have some grounding in theology and I have some intellectual knowledge that I can in pastoral, because you have to be able to communicate in that fashion. So I think in that way, I can see that as a public voice, even though it's not me standing up. communicating with others and encountering others. Also, just, I guess in some sense, I do have a public way of having to speak to people who come with all kinds of questions, and people don't realize, people will come in and say, where's the priest? I need to talk to him. Well, many times he's not here because he's doing a lot of things, just because, not always just sitting in his office. So I not that I would give them answers about things that I can't, but like you were saying, I do accompany people. I try to sit with them if they need to spend talk. If they really need to talk before we can find the pastor for them to talk to. But, and I think that whole pastoral dimension is really a lot about accompaniment and about walking with people. I don't speak on behalf of the church in some public venue, but in ways that I speak to other people in our parish. And I think I'm trusted to do that, to speak, not on behalf of the pastor, but I know that he trusts me because he hired me in this role, knowing I had been in formation, that I'm not going to steer someone to some crazy idea, that I have that background. So that's the best I can do with that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So we'll have, would any of y'all like to comment on that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Here we go.
In terms of, just to go back to the accompaniment, I think lay ecclesial ministry is all about that. It's all about becoming aware of your role as someone who accompanies people towards the life of the church. So I think in that regard, it's weird. It is kind of weird, right? Like you're seen in a different light among, whatever parish you're in, because now you have a much more public place in the life of the church. And therefore, I think that really should, and that ties into all the other dimensions of formation and of the life of the lay ecclesial minister, because all of a sudden, since you understand that your role is now pastorally public, well, you got to live it. Right? It's not a moment in which you're not really seen as a lay ecclesial minister. I live in Covington, pretty small town, so everybody knows everybody. And therefore, everybody knows that I work for the church. So if somebody sees me doing something, if a student sees me doing something dumb, then that's going to reflect not just badly upon me, but upon really the church herself. So I think that's a really important thing for us as lay ministers and those who are really seeking to be lay ministers to be aware of, is as a lay minister who's going to start working within the church and running programs and doing all this stuff, the role you have is to be a missionary for the church at all times in everything that you do, and that's a really big pastoral responsibility, I think, that we carry.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Yes, you have a comment?
A brief comment on the pastoral component, and my fellow panelists has spoken the word accompaniment. I just want to say this ILEM formation, it just blasts through to every aspect of your life. It just does. And I just have to give real life examples, just because that's how I understand it and that's how I experience it. And for me, I'll never forget Father Joe Kraft, the road to Emmaus, and just unpacking that in such depth. And it is seared in my mind. I've learned that very well, and it's a treasure because I have used it, I have applied it in real life. So even though with my fellow friends and we accompany each other when we need each other, counsel through some really tough issues, problems, etc. I was I'm gonna try the Father Kraft way, because we're here to develop that pastoral dimension as well. So let me try this out and see if it works. He's telling me it does. And it does. And one of the things I know my fellow classmates and those who've had Father Kraft will remember, it was, well, tell me more. And tell me more. And you continue this. And we all know, as people who are naturally, I think if you're here, you're a helper. If you're a lay ecclesial, it's in you. You want to get in. You want to bandage the person up. That's just quick and easy, right? I have the answer. I'm going to bring you to Christ, immediately. Yet Father Kraft was teaching us, that's not what Jesus did. Jesus walked with them, gave them total space to just unload their heart, even though he clearly knows what happened in Jerusalem. I mean, it was him. Yet, he didn't say, guys, I know, he didn't do that. He didn't cut him off. He didn't just give an answer and just, have that glorified moment. No, he just let them unpack. And in doing that, and it's so hard. You almost have to sit on your fingers to really just not get in and to really zip it, because it's the temptation is real. But I did it, and when I just was like, okay, I have so much to say, and I can't say it, it's driving me mad. But just letting my friend just keep on talking, and I just and what else? And by the end, I will say, you could feel the presence of the Holy Spirit, because instead of me giving her a bunch of advice and I felt good about myself, oh yeah, man, I'm good. It didn't end that way. It was something else, because God was present. What came from that conversation wasn't Naomi just spitting off loads of wisdom and advice and counseling. There was some of that, but there was the supernatural. I can't remember per se, but I knew it was God and it was not me. And that's when I was like, wow, Fathercraft is right. This stuff really works. And to be pastoral, this method that Jesus taught us, it's A++. It works.
I agree.
So thank you, ILEM, again.
Okay, I think Naomi is a big fan of ILEM. So, Father Craft, you got a shout out. So that's awesome. So, okay, so let's go to Naomi. Let's go to you. We'll do the women first. So we're now down to the spiritual dimension question, intellectual dimension, and human dimension question. Which one do you prefer to answer?
The academic.
Intellectual dimension. Okay, so intellectual dimension. All right, so how important do you see your academic theological training in the ILEM program as per your work and identity as a lay ecclesial minister? How has that changed you, shaped you, challenged you, enriched you? And how would you like to continue seeing yourself grow in terms of your understanding of theological knowledge of the church and her teaching? It's pretty self-explanatory. That one wasn't as long, I think, as the pastoral one.
I'd like to say that for the different Bible studies or the different ways that I wanted to know more about my faith, it was baby food. And that was necessary because that's all I could stomach at the time. And through this program, finally I was able to eat some solid food. And I think it's a continual solid food. I think it's a feast. And you just kind of get to eat something else and something else because it's ongoing. Theology is an ongoing thing, or going deep into faith is an ongoing thing. And I'm doing that by participating in the MAPL program. So that's how my intellectual dimension is continuing. How it affects my work or in ministry, it's pretty self-explanatory and obvious. I guess I was that cradle Catholic. I got my confirmation. And I think that pretty much was it. I didn't go to CCD anymore. I didn't have any continuing classes that I went to. It ended for me. So at that point, it's just kind of going through regular school and starting the career. So there's many years of it just had stopped. But through the theological courses at the seminary, through this program, it was my first time being introduced to things like philosophy. I don't understand how we don't have philosophy in law school. I personally do not. Or logic. I don't know how those courses are not taught, but that's for another subject. So for me, it's a game changer to begin like the tip of the iceberg of really the richness of our faith. And it's intellectually challenging. I didn't realize just how, I mean, it can expand your mind. It can, that one course that we had with Dr. Jacobs came in with a very short course on philosophy. I mean, my brain had never heard like that, even in law school. Like, I was just like, what is going on? Like, this is amazing, yet, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I just didn't. I didn't have that background. So for me, intellectually, it kind of fed that hunger. And I believe I can articulate things better. I'm not going to say I'm perfect at it and I'm there, by no means. But I didn't have anything. Now that I look, kind of in retrospect, but with the intellectual formation with these courses, there's more of an understanding there. I've started this journey, and I'm really kind of excited to learn more and more, and it's incredible that this is all in the 2,000 years of our Catholic faith. I just didn't know it was this amazing. So,
thank you. All right, so we're actually out of time, unfortunately. So we have, but Rafi, I will ask you a question. If you can answer in maybe a minute, this will be the test of all of the ILEM NAPA programs. So human or spiritual dimension, which one would you like to answer?
So spiritual.
All right, I apologize for going over, but we started a few minutes late. Okay, so spiritual dimension. Here's your question. How have you seen your spiritual life grow and develop? And how have you seen your own ministry and leadership in the church demand of you a different spirituality than when you were a private person and not responsible for or over other people's work and lives? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of my own professional life, I've always been
perfect.
Responsible for other people's lives professionally, because I've been a teacher since I got out of college.
Gotcha.
My baccalaureate is in theology, but I think the ministerial formation that I experienced through ILEM, it's given me an awareness of spirituality that I didn't have before, right? This whole idea of how do you see God and how do you think God sees you? This is a very purifying way of just seeing life, because every single moment you have to ask yourself, like, how am I gonna let myself see the Lord, right? And how's the Lord gonna see me, and how am I gonna view people in light of how I view God? So I would actually explain this way. Personally, my spiritual life has grown towards really a development of the spirituality of gratitude. It's been something I've been reading on. I've been really doing a lot of research, and actually I've been giving talks on, and that came from my experience of formation in ILEM, and now it's actually bleeding into the way I even do ministry, in which my entire ministerial approach is one in which I have to see all things under the context of gift, right? God giving life to me, God giving life to others, and me appreciating the gift of the people that I'm ministering to, while in a sense understanding myself as gift. I think once you develop a spirituality as a minister and let yourself be guided by the spirituality, I think that's where your really ministry begins to grow. I've seen my ministerial experience and my really ministerial work really blossom in the past few years. I would argue particularly because I've clarified a spirituality I can really treat as a well to feed me continuously.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we are at the end of this session. Thank you to our audience, grateful audience. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to all those who helped prepare for this. Like I said, this is the inaugural ILEM Alumni ongoing session. The next session will be in late September. The topic will be Christian leadership, kind of really diving into what does Christian leadership look like. And our presenters for that are going to be Dr. Tom Neal, Dr. Susie Vetters. So be on the lookout for more information about that. Also, thank you. Let's see here. A few more things I wanted to say. So, yes, okay. So there is also an ILEM alumni formation survey that I have sent out just to get your interests on different topics of formation that you'd like to hear, that you'd like to grow in. Because it is my hope that eventually you, as a trained, informed lay ecclesial minister, will be leading a topic on formation, maybe a discussion, leading one of these sessions. So if you have not completed the survey and would like to, just shoot me an email at layprograms@nds.edu, and I'd love for you to fill out the survey. Sorry, I can't talk. All right, we will end with a glory be. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good night. Okay, what the freak? I can't talk. I'm like so nervous. No, I'm like so nervous. I like stutter.
A phenomenal job as a moderator.
You think
I
so?
just thought, what, you missed your calling.
I missed my calling.
You missed your calling. I mean, you really did a great job as moderator.